The Niners were able to weather the storm versus Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin last week when Zimmer lined them up inside like he did versus the Saints. They absolutely dominated that with Ben Garland, Laken Tomlinson, and Pearson. So Big Kenny's a different guy, though. That's going to be tough for them to be able to move him in the run game and then to not be able to allow those quick pressures that can really mess with Jimmy G. They were able to versus Aaron Donald. We'll hope they were able to versus Big Ken. So we'll see there. I don't know if you've had a chance to check Twitter. I did just tag you and everyone. Hopefully the Next Fan Up podcast can retweet this. Kyle Shanahan used to be the offensive coordinator under Mike Pettin when he was in Cleveland. Of course, Mike Pettin being the defensive coordinator now of Green Bay. There was a point in an NFL films where they were both, well, at least Pettin was mic'd up, and he goes, if we could score again, we're up 14 points. He goes over to his offensive coordinator, being Kyle Shanahan, and he goes, I think we should run here. Kyle looks at him and stares, death knife stares into his skull. And Pettin goes, just do what you're comfortable with. And then it cuts to the play, and it's a touchdown with Brian Hoyer. That was before the 50-page PowerPoint that Kyle presented to get his ass out of Cleveland, because eventually the owner, or maybe the coach, I don't know, forced Johnny Manziel on him, and that's where that came from. Glad all that happened. So that matchup will be amazing. That's gonna be, I think, bigger than the opposite defense versus offense. I think if Kyle's able to run the ball, be able to get around Pettin's blitzes, then that it won't matter. The other matchup won't matter. So that'll be the biggest part for me. Coleman and Mozart versus Martinez. Again, if they're able to run the ball there, none of it's going to matter. Blake Martinez is a great run defender. The other part is if Shanahan is able to get Martinez isolated in coverage, oh man, that's not going to be good. I don't know if you checked Twitter. George Kittle actually was held out of Niners practice today.
I did see that.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. It's funny because you've really talked about a lot of the same things that I wanted to touch on. I think there's really two things that scare me about the San Francisco offense, and I think George Kittle's probably the biggest thing that scares me. I think our safety group is good, but I just think Kittle's in another stratosphere, and really we'll probably need a pretty dominant game up front from the Smith brothers to help mitigate Kittle's impact, because I just don't really know who else on our team matches up well with him. So that's probably one of the two things that scare me most. The second thing is that rushing attack that you have. For as good as Green Bay has been at getting pressure, we have been pretty up and down, mostly down in our run defense. And I think when you couple that with the pretty potent San Francisco rushing attack, and I've got to admit, I've got concerns. I watched you guys impose your will against a good Minnesota front seven last week. We're pretty comparable to them on the D line, but in the linebacking core, I think they're probably a little better. We are going to need Kenny Clark and Blake Martinez to be on point if we're going to have any hope of getting some stops and really just preventing the San Francisco rushing attack from taking over. I think realistically, it's probably going to take a total team effort of just swarming to the ball. I think this is one of the areas where you guys actually have a big advantage. Passing coverage, I think we match up a little better if you discount the Kittle matchup. He's probably going to get his. But I think outside of that, I feel pretty good about Jair Alexander and Tramon Williams in coverage. And Kevin King he's a streaky player, so if we get a good game from him, I think I'd feel like we can play you guys pretty tough. Still, I sort of think with just how big Debo is and how savvy Emmanuel Sanders is, I'm expecting a tough go of things in our secondary too. Quite frankly, I think the best plan of attack for slowing down the San Francisco passing game is just to muddy up the pocket and try to get consistent early pressure on Jimmy G. I'm not really sure what to think of him as a quarterback yet. I tend to think there's a lot of system that's there, and I don't know how much is really on him. But I think the more onus we can put on him to beat us, the better I'll feel. The pass rush has been really the strength of our defense, so this feels like the most likely path to victory for Green Bay. Zadarius has been a monster this year. You talked about him kind of lining up against some of the tackles. We've played him quite a bit, kind of in a standing rover type position, and he's got this little, I don't know, I guess it's technically a swim move, but he just knifes through the offensive line, and there have been a couple of times this year where he's like ready to take the handoff from the quarterback to the halfback. So I'm expecting we'll probably see him moved around. Preston Smith has been big in big moments. I think there's a possibility that Green Bay can cause some chaos and hopefully flip the script from what we saw back in Week 12.
I think you have to just take that Week 12 game and throw it out. Both teams are different.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the bigger differences for Green Bay, what really kind of, there was a whole cascade of events that happened in Week 12 that just kind of, we were out of it before the end of the first quarter, I want to say. We fumbled it on the third play. Brian Bulaga left on, I think, the 9th play of the game and never returned. And at that point, we had Alex Light, who had, by PFF standards, the worst score of any offensive player in Green Bay all year. So I'm hopeful that we get a better performance out of our right tackle this game. But I think that's somewhat mitigated because, if I remember right, you guys didn't have D Ford in the last one. And since he's returned, it's sort of really ratcheted up your ability just across that front.
Yeah, the Niners' pass rush is 4 times as potent with D Ford in the lineup. That is scary because Aaron Rodgers was sacked 6 times that game. But again, Balaga's back. You're right. The Killer Bees. If we move to that side of the ball, I don't know. Are we done on offense? I think I might have one more matchup to talk about.
Yeah, lay it out.
And you touched on it too. It's Kittle. Who exactly do you think they're going to place on Kittle? Is it Amos? Is it Sullivan? Savage? Who do you think?
I have no idea. Whichever lamb gets thrown to the slaughter there, I guess. I think the guy who matches up best, if I'm drawing up the defense this week, is probably Amos. He's a physical player. He's got some speed to him, some fluidity. He can be a bit of a banger, and I think we sort of need to bring some hits on Kittle. I don't even know if Amos will be able to bring him down alone on every play. I just think of the rest of the guys that we have to really try to match up against him. And you touched on Martinez earlier. He has actually played better against the pass this year than against the run, which I think is a pretty big misconception. But in general, he is not very good in pass defense, and you would be wise to try to target that matchup. So I don't know that we really have a linebacker that we can stick on him. And the only other safety that we have on our roster is Darnell Savage. And he's been a good little rookie for us, but I've seen him miss way too many tackles this year to have any confidence that he's going to be able to bring down hulking George Kittle. The only other guy I can think of is Kevin King. He's sort of a physical cornerback. If we wanted to kind of match him up there, he doesn't change directions very well, and he's also, he's not as aggressive when it comes to tackling, and I think we're gonna need to have somebody that's willing to hit. So I'll be very curious to see what we do to try to match up there because, quite frankly, I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, that should be where the Niners are able to get their production from if they aren't able to win in the run game, because I really don't see. Even Emmanuel, he's got some shake to him. He's not Devontae Adams. Deebo Samuels, he's a poor man's Percy Harvin or Golden Tate, but he's still a rookie, and he's not going to be able to consistently beat either King or Jare Alexander either. That should be the matchup there. The other matchup that will decide the game.
I suppose we could try to put Jair on him. That would be like the ultimate sign of respect, right? Like we play our number one corner out of position to try to mitigate what you can do at tight end.
But I just sort of think Emmanuel Sanders then.
Yeah, Well, yeah, I suppose you could probably stick Tremont Williams on him. He's been pretty good too this year, surprisingly good. I'm like, that guy's amazing. Don't really anticipate that that's a likely scenario that we would try to put Jair on him. It's really, we're playing him out of position, and I don't know. I think the best plan of attack is to try to get pressure on Jimmy quickly and try to just get out to a lead and try to take the run game out of it to a certain extent. I think there's a lot of things that need to go our way for us to kind of overcome in this game, I think.
Wow. It's just crazy to think it gets that level. This was a 4-12 team last year. It's just crazy.
Yeah. We were 6-9-1. So
true.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, I mean, and another thing on that, I saw something on Twitter today that it was the teams with the most NFC championship games this decade. 4 is the Packers, 4 is the 49ers, 2 is the Seahawks.
Wow. I would not have guessed that.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Wow is right. That's exactly what I said hearing that. So, yeah, pretty cool. But ready if you want to go over, we'll flip sides.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about the Packers offense. I think this offense is different than we've seen in a while because it really runs through Aaron Jones and not so much Aaron Rodgers at this point. I think at his core, Matt LaFleur wants to be a balanced rushing team. With Mike McCarthy, we were 32nd in rush attempts, 32nd in rush efficiency. It was just all pass all the time. It's a new day in Green Bay, and there's a commitment to the run game now that I think will pay dividends for Rodgers long term and probably in this game. Overall, I think the rushing offense is a pretty good unit. The offensive line has gotten progressively better in the run blocking as the year's gone on. I think that's probably to be expected given that they're switching to a brand new system. And I, quite frankly, maybe it's me seeing things through cheese tinted glasses. But I think Aaron Jones has been, if not the biggest breakout player in the NFL this year, one of the top 5. We talk about 20-some touchdowns on the year. Even so, I'm anticipating a tough day at the office for Green Bay's rushing attack. I think the 49ers are so stout up front. Bosa and Armstead are both elite run defenders, and Fred Warner is just a great all-around run and hit linebacker behind them. In the first game, our running backs only managed 83 yards on 24 attempts. I think we'll be better than that, but still might struggle to crack 100. We might have to really grind it out. Brian Bulaga, our best run blocker, did miss essentially all of last game against San Francisco, so getting him back will help. But like I said, with D Ford, he'll be back too, although maybe in a reduced capacity. Overall, I think it's probably a wash. If we can crack 120 yards, I think we can have a decent chance at keeping this game pretty competitive and potentially winning. I think that's going to be tough to do, though. We'll need some big plays to break our way. What are your thoughts about how you match up?
The one of the things that the Niners won't have that they did have in Week 12 is DJ Jones, big nose tackle there. Really, absolutely just dominated the line of scrimmage, had a sack, but the rest of his stuff really wasn't on a stat sheet because he was eating double teams and creating piles, and that he's not going to be in this game. The Niners did go out and get Earl Mitchell out of free agency. Basically, the guy had basically retired, but he was in camp with the Houston Texans at least this year. So yeah, they got their own little Marshawn Lynch story. He didn't play much against the Vikings. Didn't really need him to. If he's able to eat up some blocks there, and they're able to get penetration on that outside zone, that's all they need to kill it. But man, Aaron Jones will still make someone miss and get up to the second level. But really, I thought the same thing about Dalvin Cook, and they hemmed him up big time. Probably is Aaron Jones better? I would say yeah, but man, Cook's really good too.
I think Cook's a better pure runner, but that offensive line, I mean, we both our teams just dominated the Vikings. So I think a lot of that has to do with just them not being able to block anything up front, especially when you talk about D lines like Green Bay and San Francisco have.
Agree.
All right, so flipping it over to the passing offense, then I think it'll be more challenging this week against a passing defense that I think is as good as any. Last week, Devontae exploded for 160 yards, 8 catches. I have to imagine San Francisco will have watched that tape and have a plan for how to contain him. The question, as has been the case with